The story took place in the middle of World War II 1939–1945, where two enemies were fighting. The French army pushed back the German army. When the fierce battle ended, a soldier sat still and diligently wrote. He sat writing in the midst of the smoke rising high from the burning materials. Around him were the bodies of dead soldiers. But he still wrote and wrote. A fellow soldier passed by, surprised, and stopped to ask why. He sobbed and told his friend the following touching story. The battle had been going on for several hours when the danger siren suddenly blared. But the siren was a bit late, because immediately after that, enemy planes circled and dropped bombs like rain. People fell down like straw. I suddenly heard an earth-shattering explosion. I was thrown high into the air and then fell to the ground. Luckily, I was unharmed. On the contrary, not far from me, two soldiers collapsed. One was a German soldier. The other was a French soldier. They lay side by side. The French soldier looked up at the German soldier. The French soldier appeared to be less seriously wounded. But he must have been in great pain. At one point, I saw him put his wounded hand into his pocket and pull out a rosary covered in blood. The French soldier began to recite in Latin, Ave Maria, Hail Mary. He had no strength left. He was getting weaker. Nevertheless, he continued to pray the rosary, Ave Maria, Hail Mary. Each prayer came from his moving lips. It was all the strength he had left. He was in great pain. But he still whispered a prayer and stared at the wounded German enemy lying beside him. Pausing for a moment as if to regain his strength, the French soldier raised his arm with the rosary toward the German soldier. The rosary touched the German wounded soldier's arm. The German wounded soldier slowly raised his hand to take the other end of the rosary and responded with the second part, also in Latin, Santa Maria, Holy Mary. The French wounded soldier smiled slightly, brightening his painful face. A few gentle tears silently rolled down his pale cheeks. The French wounded soldier's arm holding the rosary trembled slightly. He was deeply moved. He wanted to hold it tighter, to pull closer the rosary that was connecting two enemies on the battlefield into two brothers, in the same affectionate sentiment offered to the Heavenly Mother Mary. The German wounded soldier was equally moved. He smiled back at the French wounded soldier's smile. He looked intently at his friend. But the French wounded soldier had closed his eyes. He had stopped breathing. Now only the German wounded soldier was left to recite the entire prayer, Ave Maria, Santa Maria. He continued to pray the rosary of his enemy, now a brother in faith and love. As I witnessed and contemplated the scene above, I had the impression that it was not the rosary that had united the two enemies into friends, but rather that the Most Holy Virgin Mary was present and that she herself had clasped the hands of the two wounded French-German soldiers in her motherly arms. Finally, the wounded German soldier braced himself, in his last resistance to death. Then his body collapsed. He used his last strength to recite aloud twice, Amen. Amen. Then he bowed his head and died. What happened next I cannot tell. There are things we only know clearly when we reach heaven. One thing I can say is that I saw two rays of light emanating from the motionless bodies of the two French-German soldiers. The two beams of light collided, creating a flash of lightning, tearing apart the densely packed atmosphere.